My legitimate older sister had been lost in Jiangnan for 2 years. My fiancé, Gu Ziyun, personally brought her back. She was gravely ill, her life hanging by a thread, and I was ordered to give my blood to save her. I refused, so she tricked me into drinking a drugged tea. Then, Gu Ziyun slashed his own wrist and said, "It's just a little blood. You won't die from it. Stop pretending. It's only a sedative." But my sister had poisoned me. In the end, I died in a mass grave, my soul lingering as a wandering ghost, watching them celebrate their wedding in a grand ceremony in Chang'an. Then, when I opened my eyes again, I was back on the very day Gu Ziyun brought my sister home. This time, I would make them taste what it felt like to be a wandering ghost. I opened my eyes. I saw my fiancé carefully carrying a woman down from a carriage. His movements were tender, as if cradling something fragile. The woman leaned softly against his chest, boneless and delicate. Under her cloak, her voice was light and clear. "Brother Ziyun, I feel much better now. You can put me down." This was my legitimate sister, missing for a year. My father, my stepmother, and all the servants rushed toward her, crowding around in excitement, scrutinizing her from head to toe. My stepmother was sobbing uncontrollably. Even my usually stern grandmother had red-rimmed eyes, smiling with relief. Gu Ziyun held her tightly, unwilling to let go, carrying her straight into the courtyard. As he passed by me, he instructed, "Rong'er, your sister has suffered for 2 years in Jiangnan. She's frail now. Take good care of her." My sister lifted her head from his embrace, her small face rosy. She looked timid yet innocent, tears shimmering in her eyes as she smiled. "Little sister, I'm finally back. I missed you so much." Seeing her smile, I suddenly realized I had been reborn. In my past life, Shen Biyun had gone alone to meet my father as he returned from handling official matters. My father made it back safely, but she never did. The Shen family searched everywhere, scouring hundreds of miles, but there was no trace of her. We all thought she was dead. 2 years later, during his campaign to suppress the rebellion in Jiangnan, Gu Ziyun stumbled upon her by Qiantang Lake. She claimed that she had gotten lost, fallen off a cliff, and was saved by an elderly couple from Jiangnan. She had lost her memory due to the injury and had lived with them for 2 years, until Gu Ziyun found her and brought her home. Gu Ziyun took exceptional care of her. I foolishly believed it was only out of pity for her suffering. I never imagined they had already fallen for each other and secretly pledged their hearts. Shen Biyun was his true love, the one he cherished above all else. The physician said she had a chronic illness and needed human blood as a cure. Specifically mine. I refused. So Shen Biyun drugged me, and Gu Ziyun personally slit my wrist to take my blood. "Rong'er, it's just a bowl of blood. You won't die." Blood streamed from my lips, but he didn't even spare me a glance. "Stop pretending. It's just a sedative to keep you obedient." But Shen Biyun had poisoned me. As I lay dying, she leaned close and whispered in my ear. "Gu Ziyun was supposed to be my fiancé. We were childhood sweethearts, a perfect match. You stole him from me. This is what you deserve, you little wretch." In the end, they abandoned me in the depths of a forest, leaving me to die in the rain. Rumors spread in the capital that I had eloped with a lover, only to be betrayed and left with no choice but to take my own life. My father and stepmother, enraged that I had disgraced the family, buried me hastily in a mass grave. I became a wandering ghost, watching them bask in their happiness, their wedding celebrated with a 10-mile-long procession of silk and lanterns. The hatred burned within me. And then I was reborn. I looked at Shen Biyun's innocent smile and smiled back. "Sister, I missed you too. I missed you so much I died for it." Father ordered the servants to prepare her courtyard. For a while, her residence was bustling with visitors, all eager to express their concern. Even my fiancé stayed by her side, never leaving her for a moment. It wasn't until nightfall that he finally remembered my existence. Gu Ziyun found me in the pavilion, his gaze filled with concern. "Rong'er, Biyun's courtyard needs time to be properly arranged. Your place is bigger, Can you let her stay there for now? She suffered these past 2 years.
She's still weak.
Leave a few maids to take care of her. After saying that, perhaps sensing he was being too much, he hesitated before adding softly, "Don't misunderstand. You are my fiancée. I only see her as a sister." I smiled sweetly at him. After Shun Biyun disappeared, my stepmother had kept her courtyard untouched, holding onto memories of her. It was cleaned daily, only missing some clothes and trinkets. So, what was this nonsense about needing time to prepare? Besides, the moment she entered the house, my stepmother had already taken my maids away to serve her. How many more did she need? In my past life, I would have exploded with fury, shouting in outrage, only to receive Gu Ziyun's cold reprimand. She just got home. It's natural for her to be a little spoiled. She's suffered enough. How can you be so petty? This time, I decided to grant them their wish. I swallowed my hatred and gave him a bright, innocent smile. Sister has finally come home. As the legitimate daughter, she deserves the best. Even if you didn't ask, I was already prepared. Look. Gu Ziyun was startled. He looked past me and saw servants bustling about, moving furniture. My personal maid, Chunlian, approached and reported, "Second miss, your clothes have been moved to the guest room." I nodded with a smile and instructed her to clean the room thoroughly and light the finest incense. Besides Chunlian, the rest don't need to follow me. Gu Ziyun seemed surprised. His gaze lingered on me, the corners of his lips curving slightly. With a gentle touch, he tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Ronger, you've grown so sensible." Gu Ziyun had an undeniably handsome face, and his deep, soothing voice was pleasant to hear. He knew how to use these advantages well. I used to fall for them. I met his gaze with a smile. Now all I felt was utter disgust. These hands had once taken my life. Not only did I voluntarily give up my courtyard, but I also sent Shin Biyun many fine gifts: silk, gold, and silver jewelry, rare trinkets. These were gifts from my parents to me, but I had always believed my sister would return, so I dared not use them. Now that she's back, they all belong to her. Father and my stepmother had been cold toward me for days. At this moment, a faint trace of guilt flashed across their faces. Ever since their precious daughter returned, I, the illegitimate daughter, was no longer their only focus. The fact that I knew my place only made them all the more pleased. But Shun Biyun saw things differently. Leaning against a soft pillow, she looked delicate and pitiful, her face full of grievance, as she spoke in a tearful voice. "Mimi, are you upset that I came back and took your things? It's all my fault. I never should have returned." She sniffled softly, as if she had suffered a great injustice. She had been like this in my past life as well. With just a few words, she could easily manipulate others, subtly guiding their thoughts toward malicious interpretations of me, yet no one ever noticed. And me? I was too straightforward. I always refuted her bluntly, which only earned me the reputation of a jealous, vicious fool who resented her legitimate sister. The elders of the family grew utterly disgusted with me. Now I understand. With people like her, reasoning is pointless. I lowered my gaze, and when I looked up again, my eyes were brimming with tears. I cried even louder than she did. I said that ever since my sister disappeared, Mother had been in tears every day. Watching her suffer made my heart ache, but I dared not speak of it, afraid of deepening her sorrow. Father and Mother had showered me with love, but that was only because they had transferred their love for her onto me. I couldn't refuse the gifts they gave me. I had to accept them happily. At the time, I thought, one day, my sister will return, and when she sees the gifts from Father and Mother, she'll surely be happy. Jia, these things were always meant to be yours. Hearing this, my stepmother teared up. She gently stroked my hair, showing a rare moment of kindness. Child, you are so thoughtful. Father, too, smiled in relief. Shun Bian looked on, quietly clenching her teeth, resentment flashing in her eyes. I saw it all. Since returning, she had always put on the appearance of being sickly. The doctor couldn't diagnose anything, only saying that she had suffered hardships and fallen into poor health. Gu Ziyun was especially distressed and visited my house daily. He feared she would feel lonely, so he kept sending her all sorts of novelties. Whenever I passed by her courtyard, I could hear Shin Biyun's sweet laughter and Gu Ziyun's deep chuckles. When they found something amusing, they would exchange lingering glances, their eyes full of affection. Even a blind man could see it. Sometimes I would catch them flirting. The awkwardness on Gu Ziyun's face would flicker for just a moment before he quickly regained his composure. Biyun has been feeling down because of her illness. I was just trying to comfort her. Don't overthink it. I only see her as a younger sister. A brother taking care of his sister, it's only natural. I nodded understandingly, my expression full of trust. That night, Shin Biyun, supported by her maid, came to the courtyard where I was temporarily staying. She glanced around, a flash of disdain crossing her face. Then, she lightly pressed a handkerchief to the corner of her eye. It must have been hard for Mimi to stay here. I've been back for so many days but haven't come to see you. You don't blame me, do you? I told Brother Ziyun that I was fine, but he wouldn't let me get out of bed. See, I had to wait until he left before I could sneak over. She let out a delicate laugh. Don't tell on me. Her face was all innocence, yet every word flaunted how much my fiancé favored and spoiled her. No woman could tolerate such a thing. She smiled faintly, waiting for me to lose my temper. But I didn't. I played the fool even better than she did. I only froze for a moment before flashing a bright, naive smile. Don't worry, Jejia. I won't tell him. We all hope you recover soon, but the young lord is right. You really shouldn't be getting out of bed so soon. I affectionately took her hand and led her to her room. Anyway, the most important thing now is for you to take good care of your health. Shun Biyun's eyes widened in disbelief. She gave me a strange look, as if she hadn't expected me to be so dense. Then, seeing no threat, she smirked smugly. I, too, laughed carefreely. From that moment on, her guard was completely down. In private, her relationship with Gu Ziyun grew increasingly intimate. Whenever he looked at her, his eyes were filled with unbreakable tenderness. Yet, he still had the audacity to tell me they shared only sibling affection. Did he take me for a fool? Chunlian, the maid I had taken in from among the refugees, was fiercely loyal to me. Seeing how I constantly yielded, she was already seething with anger on my behalf. Second miss, if you keep letting this happen, the young lord will be snatched away by the eldest miss. I gazed at the peach blossoms outside, swirling in the wind, and merely smiled faintly. I was counting on her to snatch him away. As we spoke, a servant from Shin Biyun's courtyard arrived, saying that the eldest miss was crying bitterly and asking me to come take a look. Stepping into her courtyard, I saw Shin Biyun sitting there, her gaze downcast, looking utterly dejected. Gu Ziyun was beside her, speaking to her gently. When she reached the most sorrowful part of her tale, she let out a delicate sob and collapsed into his embrace, making his heart ache all the more. I stepped back behind the wall and listened quietly. She was talking about Bailu Academy. Bailu Academy was the most prestigious school in the Liang dynasty, only admitting members of the royal family and high-ranking officials' children. Gaining entry meant earning immense prestige in the capital, and the final available spot belonged to me. Shun Biyun lamented how envious she was that I could attend the academy. She had lived like a village girl with an old couple in Jiangnan for the past 2 years and had made no academic progress. If she went to the capital now, she would surely be mocked by noble ladies. Seeing her like this, Gu Ziyun's eyes filled with pity. He turned to me and said, "Romer, your sister has already lost 2 years. Let her take your place at Bailu Academy. The Shin family has already hired many tutors for you these past 2 years. No matter how much a woman learns, in the end, she still marries. But your sister is different." Shun Biyun feigned surprise, hesitating as if she wanted to speak but stopped herself. Seeing this, Gu Ziyun immediately stepped forward protectively, ready to defend her. She remained silent, playing along. He added, his brows furrowed in concern. Your sister is the legitimate daughter. If others see Shindarin favoring a concubine-born daughter too much, he may face impeachment. If your father is accused of favoring you over your sister, it could damage your family's reputation. Hearing this, I sneered inwardly. He knew how hard I had worked to get into Bailu Academy. Yet, with just a few words, he expected me to hand it over. If I refused, I would be branded as jealous and disrespectful. So I might as well go along with it. I smiled graciously and agreed. Of course. Jiejie is the legitimate daughter of the Shin family. It's only right. Shun Biyun was overjoyed, casting me a perfunctory, apologetic smile before turning to Gu Ziyun, her heart full of gratitude. Brother Ziyun, thank you. If not for you, I might never have entered Bailu Academy. Gu Ziyun replied. If you had never left the capital, this spot would have been yours from the start. Disgusting. His father felt guilty about making him give up his spot at the academy, so he wanted to hire a great scholar to teach him the 4 arts: qin, chess, calligraphy, and painting. But he insisted on becoming the disciple of Master Wu from Banksy Grass Hut. Master Wu had been the top scorer in the imperial examination a few years ago, a man of extraordinary talent. He had served in the Hanlin Academy, but was dismissed for openly contradicting the emperor. Now, he lived in seclusion by a stream east of the city, eccentric and aloof. But he knew that Master Wu would be the future prime minister. Shun Bijuan's eyes gleamed with schadenfreude, yet she spoke with feigned regret and sorrow. This is all my fault. That day, I was only sad because my sister got into Bailu Academy. If Ziyun hadn't tried to lecture her, she wouldn't have gotten so upset. She stepped forward and affectionately took his hand. Her eyes reddened. Sister, even if you can't enter Bailu Academy, with father's official connections, there are other academies or great scholars you can study under. Why must you degrade yourself like this? Then she repeatedly belittled Master Wu, saying he had no respect for the emperor, disregarded the 3 cardinal guides and 5 constant virtues, was eccentric, and was not a good person. Associating with him would ruin his reputation. If sister studies under him, your reputation? He was displeased but only smiled lightly. I'm just a concubine-born daughter. My reputation hardly matters. But you, sister, as the legitimate daughter of the Shin family, must enter Bailu Academy to bring honor to our family. He deepened his smile, his voice taking on a hint of flattery. Sister, the Shin family's honor now rests on your shoulders. You're so brilliant. You must be a true literary talent. Bailu Academy was dedicated to nurturing the elite, not a place for noble ladies to compare their looks and jewelry. Every young master and lady there was striving to be the best. Shin Bijuan only realized after entering that it was a living hell, exhausting coursework and difficult studies. But quitting was no longer an option. Master Wu, however, was different. He was easygoing and carefree. If he went, Master Wu taught him. If he didn't, Master Wu simply slept. Seeing him come and go freely every day, Shin Bijuan was envious. Then, turning back to her essays, she was immediately filled with despair. Her maid tried to encourage her. Miss, young Master Gu is the heir of the loyal and brave Marquis from a prestigious family and one of the most talented scholars in the capital. Many noble ladies admire him. Just as Shun Bijuan was about to pick up her books to study, he arrived with a kite, coaxing her to come out and play. Sister, you could read at 3 and compose poetry at 5. Your memory is unparalleled in the capital. You don't need to work as hard as those fools. The spring weather is perfect. How could you waste it? Sister, you're so smart. Even without much effort, you'll still outshine everyone in the capital. Shin Bijuan put down her books. Whenever she left for the academy, she would see him heading out as well, either in luxurious silk robes, shopping, or in riding gear, playing polo. Today, a new batch of rouge arrived at Yunxiang Pavilion, rumored to have an exquisite fragrance. He had to see it for himself. He had already asked for leave from Master Wu. Master Wu never checked his coursework, so it didn't matter. While she was buried in essays and assignments, he was calling for his servants to prepare a carriage. Off for spring outing today. Tailoring tomorrow. Slowly, she was influenced. Her focus drifted, and she began to neglect her studies. Whenever she heard of new powders or fabrics in town or some exciting event, she had to experience it firsthand. Her maid tried to persuade her, but Shun Bijuan was already irritated. Then, with a swift move, he slapped the maid across the face. You have such a vicious heart. Bailu Academy's coursework is so demanding, sometimes. Essays take until midnight to finish. My sister's health is frail, and yet you push her to study recklessly. Do you want to ruin her? Everyone knows my sister is exceptionally gifted. No noble lady can match even a tenth of her brilliance. How can they compare? She's already suffered for 2 years, and now a mere servant dares to oppress her. Saying this, he pretended to be heartbroken, his eyes reddening. Miss, spare me. I didn't mean that. The maid collapsed to the ground, trembling in fear. Shin Bijuan's face darkened, her gaze sharp. The more she looked at the maid, the more she felt that the servant had overstepped. Anger surged within her, and she immediately had the maid sold off. From then on, no one dared to persuade her to work hard. Instead, they flattered her and treated her with utmost care. He also praised her, singing her praises to the heavens. To outsiders, he was a carefree young lady, spending every day indulging in pleasures. But halfway through each carriage ride, he would turn around and head to Banksy Grass Hut. Deep into the night, he studied by candlelight. Only Shin Bijuan completely abandoned her studies at Bailu Academy. She often used poor health as an excuse to skip classes, and their father and stepmother believed her, turning a blind eye. In the capital, there were elegant gatherings known as poetry banquets. This month, the event was hosted by the Princess Royal. Both he and Shin Bijuan received invitations. Everyone expected that, having neglected her studies, Shun Bijuan would embarrass herself with poor poetry. But Shun Bijuan simply smiled, lifted her chin, and composed a poem on the spot within 7 steps. One of the lines, "Unsent longing, gazing at the returning swallows," was a masterpiece. Applause thundered through the hall. What a poem! Brilliant! Shun Bijuan basked in the attention, the center of the gathering. She smiled faintly. You're too kind. Beside him, Chuanlian whispered, Second miss, isn't that your poem? He calmly sipped his tea, blowing on it. Nonsense. Sister wrote it, so it's hers. Chuanlian looked puzzled. Shin Bijuan's reputation as a literary prodigy spread. Soon, more works flowed from her hands, poems, essays, compositions, all exquisite. Everyone knew that the eldest daughter of the Minister of Personnel was an extraordinary talent. The family elders were overjoyed, and even Gu Ziyun felt honored. She stole the spotlight, while he remained in the shadows. With her being praised, others naturally looked down on him. Rumors spread, Shun Bijuan was a woman of destiny, the pride of the Shun family. Meanwhile, he, the concubine-born daughter, was insignificant, nothing more than her foil. The eldest Miss Shen is a talented lady. Young Master Gu is a gifted scholar. They make a perfect pair. Shin Bijuan relished these words. But there was always more. So, what if she's a talented lady? Gu Shizi's fiancé is her useless little sister. The proud heir of the loyal and brave marquis is marrying a mere concubine-born daughter. No matter how outstanding the legitimate sister is, unless she marries a prince, she'll be overshadowed by her sister for life. It's fate, isn't it? The words rang in Shin Bijuan's ears, echoing relentlessly. She clenched her handkerchief so tightly it nearly tore apart, her eyes filled with unwillingness. Thus, she fell ill again from sorrow. When I went to her courtyard, I saw her weakly leaning in Gu Ziyun's embrace, sobbing softly. Her shoulders trembled, making her look especially pitiful. Gu Ziyun's eyes were full of distress as he held her tightly. Then, he slowly lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. Juna. Shin Biyun, comforted by his embrace, murmured, Ziyun Gij. Deep in the woods, Sunlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating her flushed, intoxicated face. Gu Ziyun kissed her with deep concentration, his eyes closed, unaware that Shin Biyun had subtly shifted her gaze toward me. Her eyes were filled with triumphant amusement. She had finally dropped the act. After Gu Ziyun left, Shin Biyun shed her gentle and refined mask. The purity in her expression vanished as she smirked at me smugly. "Shun Rong, did you see that? The engage only loves me." She touched her swollen lips and smiled shyly. "He still can't forget me. If I hadn't been away for the past 2 years, the engagement would never have fallen to you. Zian Gij knows this very well, which is why he never had feelings for you. His heart has always belonged to me." I nodded. I knew. I didn't care. But I also wouldn't give up so easily. Blinking innocently, I asked, "Then, sister, are you going to be his concubine?" Shun Biyun's face instantly darkened. Gritting her teeth, she spat out, "Just you wait," before striding away. My engagement to Gu Ziyun was personally decreed by the emperor. It wouldn't be so easy to break. Chunlian said my words were truly satisfying, and that Shin Biyun's expression back then had turned from green to black, truly a sight to behold. "But you should have been fiercer, second miss." Chunlian pouted. "You should have called her shameless and scratched her face. Coveting her own sister's fiancé? She doesn't need that face anyway." I tapped her forehead with a smile. "Enough chatter. Help me with something." "What is it?" "Go to Jiangnan." By the time mid-autumn arrived, the Empress was hosting a chrysanthemum banquet. My stepmother brought Shin Biyun and me into the palace. Ever since Shin Biyun dropped her act with me, she no longer pretended in private, even making snide remarks whenever she came to my room. Only in front of others would she put on that innocent, kind, and lovable smile again. As we passed by a lotus pond, Shin Biyun suddenly leaned close. She appeared affectionate, but in a chilling voice, she whispered into my ear, "Sister, who said I had no way out?" I turned to her in confusion. Before I could react, she let out a piercing scream and fell straight into the pond, gripping a piece of my sleeve as she went down. To everyone else, it looked exactly like I had pushed her. "Sister, I was wrong. It all happened in an instant." Before I could even react, a swift figure leaped past me and dove into the water. Panic erupted on the shore. "Young Lord Gu. Miss Shin. Help. Someone has fallen into the water." I watched coldly as Gu Ziyun pulled her out in no time. When they surfaced, Shun Biyun's wet clothes clung to her body. Gu Ziyun held her tightly, hastily ordering the maids to bring a cloak, wrapping her up securely to keep her modesty intact. But her modesty. She had intended for Gu Ziyun to see it. Shivering in his arms, Shun Biyun trembled from the cold. Gu Ziyun's face was filled with pain. As he passed by me, his eyes were full of hatred. He called out my name in full, his voice laced with accusation. "Shen Rong, how vicious can you be? What did she do wrong for you to harm her like this?" "What did I do wrong?" Gu Ziyun didn't even let me explain. He had already decided I was guilty. The Imperial Garden was full of people. If I truly wanted to harm her, why would I be foolish enough to do it in the palace, in broad daylight? But unfortunately, the Gu Ziyun who was decisive and sharp on the battlefield had completely lost his intelligence when it came to his beloved. Shin Biyun certainly knew how to manipulate men. What a brilliant trick. At that moment, I finally understood what she meant by having a way out. Sure enough, not long after we returned home, Shin Biyun attempted suicide by hanging. Luckily, the maids found her in time and saved her. But the dark bruise around her neck was glaringly obvious. Upon seeing this, my stepmother wept bitterly. "Junior, why would you do something so foolish?" "Mother, I don't want to live anymore." Mother and daughter clung to each other, crying their hearts out. Shun Biyun sobbed, tears streaming down her face. She said that after falling into the water in front of so many people, her ruined reputation meant no one would ever marry her. She didn't want to bring shame to the Shin family, so she had no choice but to die. "Junior." Before long, Gu Ziyun arrived in a hurry. With a resolute voice, he declared, "I will marry her. In the Golden Throne Hall, Gu Ziyun knelt before the emperor, begging him to annul my engagement and instead bestow a marriage decree for Shen Biyun. Shen Rong is malicious and schemed against her elder sister. Heaven will not tolerate it. Such a woman is unfit to be the future Marchioness of the Gu family. Juner and I grew up together. We have always loved each other. I am willing to trade my military merits for a marriage decree. Your Majesty, please grant my request. He firmly insisted that he had ruined Shen Biyun's reputation and had to take responsibility. However, the Gu family's rules forbade concubines, so the position of his official wife could only go to Shen Biyun. When the annulment edict arrived at the Shen residence, I was already in the ancestral hall, beaten black and blue by my stepmother. No matter how much I explained, she refused to believe me. Shortly after, the imperial decree for the new marriage arrived. My stepmother beamed with joy, saying, "Good,
Good.
good," over and over. My Juner deserves someone like young Lord Gu. What a fine son-in-law, responsible, affectionate, and loyal. She praised him endlessly. As for me, she shot me a look of disgust, as if I were a curse upon the family. You brought disgrace to the Shen family by scheming against your own sister. You're a disgrace. Chunlian had just returned from Jiangnan. Seeing the wounds covering my back and thighs, she teared up as she helped me back to my room. "Miss, does it hurt?" It did. But I gritted my teeth and endured it, only asking her if she had found anything in Jiangnan. She nodded. "Yes, then it's worth it. One day, I'll make her pay for this." After the incident in the Imperial Garden, Shen Biyun had been confined to her bed, looking frail and listless. Doctors came and went, all reaching the same conclusion. She had an underlying illness, and the drowning had only worsened it, putting her life at risk. Finally, one doctor said her condition was difficult to treat, but he had a remedy that required human blood as a catalyst. "I'll do it," Gu Ziyun volunteered without hesitation. Tears of gratitude welled up in Shen Biyun's eyes. "How could I bear to let you do this, Ziyun Gij?
Don't harm yourself for my sake.
Our bodies are gifts from our parents." Before he could act, the doctor stopped him.
Young lord, you are a man.
"Your yang energy is too strong. It will clash with Miss Shen's delicate constitution." The blood needed for the ritual had to come from someone born in the year of the dragon, during the hour of Z, a time when yin energy was at its strongest. Ideally, it should be from a close relative or a woman of high status. He wrote down several birth charts that met the criteria. One of them was mine.
Gu Ziyun.
It must be fate. He found me and, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, told me to cut my wrist and offer my blood. "It's just 2 taels of blood a day. You won't die from it. She's your legitimate elder sister, your closest kin. You don't want anything to happen to her, do you?" No, I did. My face darkened. I refused. He stepped closer, softening his voice, adopting that refined, gentlemanly demeanor, his gaze gentle and sincere. "Romer, I misunderstood you before. I owe you an apology. As for my engagement to your sister, I had no choice. If I didn't agree, she might not have survived. If you refuse, I fear others will speak ill of you." I looked up at him, watching him put on a face of deep affection, and felt nothing but disgust. He actually thought I was infatuated with him, that I would obey his every absurd demand. Where did he get such audacity? I furrowed my brows, pretending to be confused and troubled. "Shitsi, who told you that was my birth chart? It's off by a day and an entire hour." Hearing this, Gu Ziyun's eyes widened in disbelief. His face quickly hardened, and he spoke with pain and condemnation. "You'd rather watch your elder sister die? You'd even lie to avoid helping her. If you think I'm lying, ask the old madam." I was completely confident. The year my mother gave birth to me, she had gone to a temple to offer incense just before labor. A sudden mountain flood trapped her there, and she had no choice but to give birth in the temple. I wasn't brought back to the Shun residence until half a month after I was born. The only person who knew my actual birth time was the midwife who had delivered me. The first thing I did after reincarnating was find her and have my birth chart changed. She had already sent word to the old madam, explaining that due to being stranded in the mountain temple, she had lost track of time and misremembered my birth date. Now that she recalled it, she had come to correct the record. The old madam had simply never informed the younger generation. My new birth chart not only avoided the hour of excessive yin energy, but also carried strong yang energy, directly clashing with Shin Bijuan's. Sorry, dear sister, but I can't help you. Shun Bijuan looked pitiful on the surface, but beneath that gentle facade, she was gritting her teeth in rage. Our gazes met in the air, engaging in an unspoken battle that had already been fought several times over. Gu Ziyun, however, remained completely oblivious, wearing an expression of deep sorrow. I smirked to myself. He should savor this feeling of heartache. There was plenty more to come. Although I couldn't help my dear sister, there were plenty of people in the capital. With a heavy reward, there would surely be volunteers. I had already posted a notice. Anyone whose birth chart met the criteria and was willing to donate their blood would receive a generous reward from both the Shun and Gu families. Shitzi, what do you think of this solution? Gu Ziyun's eyes lit up. Not long after, the emperor personally sought out Mr. Wu 3 times before finally appointing him as prime minister. With such a grand promotion, he was in high spirits and decided to host a poetry gathering. My father brought our family along to attend. My wounds were still fresh, leaving me pale and bloodless, adding a fragile beauty to my appearance. I let every bit of my suffering show on my face, and anyone who saw me couldn't help but look at me with sympathy. Mr. Wu had already heard about my situation. Seeing my near-death state, he had been scowling at my father and 2 elder brothers since the moment he entered the venue. I thought your eldest daughter was on the brink of death? Why does she look perfectly fine to me? Meanwhile, my student looks like he's about to drop dead.
He scoffed.
I also heard that they're making her bleed to save someone. Which quack doctor came up with this? Does his brain have shit in it? Or incense ashes? Father looked utterly embarrassed. Mr. Wu was the most outspoken of all the scholars. He always spoke his mind, which was precisely why the emperor often wanted to strangle him, but I liked him for it. The poetry gathering hadn't even begun before it turned into Mr. Wu's personal roasting session. Quoting classic texts, he denounced the absurdity of superstition, declaring that using bloodletting as a treatment was nothing but harmful witchcraft. Scholars should have rational minds and discern right from wrong. Trading life for life, what kind of beasts would do such a thing? His words struck directly at Gu Ziyun's weak spot. Gu Ziyun's face darkened. Sir, your words are too harsh. We are not taking lives recklessly. There is a generous reward. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Mr. Wu let out a strange laugh. Did I say anything about money? I said this is witchcraft. Our dynasty strictly prohibits sorcery and curses. How many heads do you have? Do your military achievements make your neck any sturdier? Gu Ziyun's expression soured. Junar is Minister Shun's legitimate daughter. Anyone who donates blood to save her would be honored. How can that be considered witchcraft? Shin Bijuan, looking weak and pitiful, forced a faint smile, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. If such a person truly exists, the Shin family would be forever grateful. As for me, I vow to become a vegetarian for life. Seeing no point in further conversation, Mr. Wu waved his sleeve and left his seat. Even as he walked away, his lips kept moving, seemingly cursing them under his breath. I read his lips. He was calling them a pair of shameless scoundrels. At that moment, a figure in bright yellow arrived, her presence commanding attention as a gentle breeze accompanied her steps. The Grand Princess, surrounded by a group of palace maids and eunuchs, made her entrance. After the customary greetings, Mr. Wu invited her to take the seat of honor. But she wasn't in a hurry. Her beautiful eyes scanned the crowd before finally settling on Shin Bijuan. So, you're the Shin family's famed talented daughter? She studied Shin Bijuan intently, amusement flashing in her gaze. You are indeed striking, graceful, and stunning. Shin Bijuan gave a demure smile and was just about to respond when
Slap.
a crisp, resounding slap landed across her face. The Grand Princess rebuked her sharply. You have some nerve. You actually dared to scheme for this princess to cut her flesh and bleed for you. The hall fell into dead silence. Mr. Wu was momentarily stunned, then, in the next second, he clapped excitedly. Well done. Shin Bijuan had been caught completely off guard. Losing her balance, she stumbled to the ground, clutching her burning cheek, utterly dumbfounded. The Grand Princess then turned her furious gaze onto Gu Ziyun. Though my husband disagrees with you politically, he has always been upright and never spoken ill of you behind your back. Yet you conspired with this woman to curse me to death. Her tone dripped with sarcasm. Gu Shizhi, you truly are the very picture of a noble gentleman. The entire crowd suddenly realized the truth. So, the highly sought-after birth chart in the capital, the one they were offering a fortune for, belonged to the Grand Princess? Gasps of shock spread through the venue. Shin Bijuan paled, her tears glistening as she stammered. Your Highness, I truly am ill. The diagnosis is real. As for the bloodletting ritual, that was merely a folk remedy. I never knew it was your birth chart. Never knew. The Grand Princess sneered. What kind of illness requires a specific person's blood? Enlighten me. I'd love to see it for myself. When the imperial physician arrived, Shin Bijuan panicked. Gu Ziyun thought she was just frightened and gently reassured her. Don't be afraid. Imperial physician Yu has served His Majesty for years and is the most skilled in the Imperial Medical Academy. He might have a better cure. Then, stepping forward to defend his fiancée, he declared, Your Highness, my fiancé was unjustly punished by you. I will report this to His Majesty and seek justice for both of us. But the next moment, he was utterly humiliated. After a thorough examination, the imperial physician frowned and asked, Miss Shin, why do your symptoms not match your pulse at all? In fact, they contradict each other. You are perfectly healthy. The crowd erupted in laughter, condemning Shin Bijuan and Gu Ziyun for conspiring to frame the princess and her husband. Why would Miss Shin pretend to be sick? Using human blood in medicine, that's beyond sinister. And she demanded the princess's blood. Just because her father holds an official position, she acts like she's royalty herself. Does young Master Gu truly know nothing? The idea of using human blood in medicine is absurd, yet he believed it. Gu Ziyun was stunned. Fake, he muttered blankly. Brother Ziyun, I don't know what happened either. Shin Bijuan, desperate, tried to shift the blame onto the physician who had diagnosed her, claiming he must have been bribed to harm the princess and that she was merely being used. Since the princess's husband had made many enemies in court, her excuse seemed plausible. As she spoke, she secretly signaled her maid, who gave a slight nod before discreetly moving toward the door. She was going to silence the doctor. However, just as the maid reached the exit, the physician unexpectedly arrived. Shin Bijuan's face turned deathly pale. The physician looked puzzled. Miss Shin, weren't you the one who sent for me, claiming you were unwell? I had everything prepared in advance. I stood quietly to the side, coldly watching as they tore each other apart. There was still more entertainment to come. Faced with the princess's imposing presence, the physician needed no torture to confess. Trembling, he prostrated himself and cried, Your Highness, spare me. I know nothing. I was merely following Miss Shin's instructions and taking her money to do a job. He pointed at the maid and swore. It was her. She's the one who cursed the princess. Hearing this, a gleam flashed through Shin Bijuan's eyes. She suddenly slapped the maid hard and feigned heartbreak, exclaiming, Tanner, I have always treated you well. Why would you do this to me?
Who sent you?
The slap was so forceful that Tanner crashed into a table, splitting her forehead open. Blood gushed out as she lost consciousness. Gasps filled the room. The princess's expression turned icy. Miss Shin, are you trying to silence a witness? At that moment, Shin Bijuan realized her mistake. Unless she had killed the maid with that slap, there were plenty of ways to make her talk. With the imperial physician present, a few acupuncture needles were all it took to wake Tanu up. She knelt on the floor, crying, It was the eldest miss who ordered me to steal the second Mrs. Birth characters. She wanted to harm her, but I didn't know the Birth characters were wrong and actually matched the princesses. I never intended to harm the princess. After saying this, she fainted again. I feigned shock, my eyes brimming with sorrow as I staggered forward, my voice trembling. Sister, what did I do wrong for you to want me dead? Gu Ziyun's eyes widened in disbelief. He looked at Shin Bijuan as if she were a stranger. Why did you deceive us all? Why did you want to harm Rong? That name, Rong, felt jarring to my ears. Shin Bijuan sobbed. Brother Ziyun, I was afraid you'd abandon me. We grew up together, and our families arranged our marriage. But after just 2 years of my absence, you got engaged to my younger sister. Do you know how much it hurt when I found out? Tears streamed down her face as she cried pitifully, every word filled with love for Gu Ziyun. After a pause, she innocently added, I was just playing a little joke on her. I never really wanted her blood. Look, she's perfectly fine, isn't she? With just a few words, Gu Ziyun's anger vanished completely. Turning to me, she pouted. Sister, it was just a joke. You wouldn't be so petty as to hold a grudge, would you? For a moment, I was speechless. Chuan Lian, already furious, put her hands on her hips, ready to argue. Just then, Master Wu suddenly exclaimed, No, I've figured it out. Everyone turned to look at him. Shun Bijuan plagiarized my students' poetry and essays. Was she afraid of being exposed, so she tried to silence the witness? Shun Bijuan's face drained of color once again. The crowd perked up their ears in anticipation. Shun Bijuan was a student of White Deer Academy. If this so-called talented lady had stolen her works, it would not only tarnish her reputation but also disgrace the academy and her family. The capital never lacked gossip over tea, but fresh scandals were always welcome. Master Wu stroked his white beard and said slowly, No wonder I kept hearing students discussing Shen Rong's poetry and essays. I never expected that she had been secretly selling them to a bookstore, and her buyer was none other than Miss Shen. In the southern part of the city, there's a bookstore called Spring and Autumn Press that discreetly handles such transactions. Those who fancy poetry but lack talent can place an order, and impoverished scholars can sell their work in exchange for money. It's an unspoken rule. One sells, one buys, and both parties keep it confidential. Ever since Shin Bijuan started buying poems from the bookstore, I struck a deal with the owner, taking over all her orders myself. So, most of her so-called works actually came from me. Before selling them, I even had Master Wu review them. Master Wu, unconcerned with propriety, disregarded any unspoken rules. After scolding Shin Bijuan for her deception, he turned to reprimand me. Buying and selling literary works, how disgraceful. The integrity of a scholar cannot be measured in gold or silver. And now, you've brought trouble upon yourself. What a disgrace. He was deeply disappointed in me. I lowered my head in silence, while Chunlian stepped forward to defend me. Master, don't blame the second miss. She thought the eldest miss was seriously ill, so she sold her writings to buy medicine and supplements for her. She even sent me everywhere to find famous doctors, losing a lot of money in the process, but never daring to tell the Lord and Madam. That's why she came up with this way to make money. Who would have thought? Chunlian glanced at Shin Bijuan. Who would have thought the eldest miss was never sick in the first place, and the one buying the essays was also her? With the truth exposed, the crowd sighed in astonishment. So, that's how she gained her reputation as a talented lady. She's truly disgraced White Deer Academy. Oh my God, we actually had a classmate like this? Miss Shin. First, she stole her younger sister's place at the academy, then she snatched away her fiancé, and now she even wants to kill her? Did second Miss Shin commit some heinous crime or something? Have you heard about the incident in the Imperial Garden? I heard that a eunuch saw it. She fell into the water by herself. The crowd whispered among themselves, pointing fingers at Shin Biyun. Shin Biyun's expression grew more and more flustered. She glanced around in panic, her head shaking frantically. Finally, she looked at Gu Ziyun, her eyes full of helplessness and pitifulness. But Gu Ziyun only responded with a gaze as cold as ice. Fragility and tears had always been her weapons, but this time, Gu Ziyun hesitated. After this day, Shun Biyun's reputation was utterly ruined. But that wasn't enough. In my past life, I lost my life because of her. Back at home, Shun Biyun smashed vase after vase in her room, venting her fury. The servants knelt on the ground, trembling in fear. After this day, she was no longer the talented woman of the capital, but its laughingstock.
How could she not hate me?
And in her eyes, I was the one who caused all of this. After venting her anger, she stormed into my courtyard, her face twisted with rage, her features contorted. You must be feeling so pleased with yourself, aren't you? You did this on purpose, didn't you? Was all of this your plan? I simply replied calmly, Sister, if all you wanted was Gu Ziyun, just say the word. I would have given him to you. From childhood till now, what have I not given up for you? Why must you insist on my death? Shin Biyun merely sneered arrogantly. I don't need you to give me anything. She didn't want anyone's charity. She didn't want people saying she stole someone else's love, staining her name. Gu Ziyun personally petitioning for the imperial marriage decree, that was her victory. Shin Biyun was not one to sit and wait for her downfall. She wept bitterly before father and mother, wailing her grievances. Mother, she pretended to give up the academy placement just to frame me. She was afraid I'd outshine her, so she deliberately pushed me into the water. That doctor and that wretched maid, she must have bribed them to ruin my reputation. She was a master of twisting the truth, crying pitifully as she accused me before our parents. Father and mother had always favored her, and the more they listened, the more they believed her words, convinced that I was the scheming one who maliciously framed my elder sister. Mother was heartbroken and cursed furiously. She's just like her birth mother, not worth a damn. Father simply shook his head, his voice filled with disappointment. What an unfortunate family, what an unfortunate family indeed. As for Gu Ziyun, though he was disappointed in her, his love remained. All Shun Biyun had to do was shed a few tears and whisper sweetly in his ear, and he was powerless against her. He trusted his own judgment. Shun Rong, don't think that your little tricks will change my mind. In this life, I will only love Juner. I once looked after you because you were her younger sister, but from now on, I won't let you hurt her again. I was drinking tea in my courtyard when Gu Ziyun suddenly appeared before me, his gaze sharp and full of anger as he scolded me. But when he looked at Shin Biyun, his expression softened, his eyes filled with affection. I only found it amusing, though soon enough he wouldn't be laughing anymore. As the wedding day approached, Shun Biyun and Gu Ziyun went out to shop together. A handsome man and a beautiful woman, brimming with love, drawing the attention of countless onlookers. Suddenly, a raggedly dressed man lunged forward and clung to Shin Biyun's leg, his voice trembling with joy. Juner, I finally found you. You said you were going out to buy something, but you never came back. You returned to the capital. Why didn't you tell me? Come home with me. Mother, and I have been missing you so much. Shun Biyun recognized the voice instantly. Her eyes widened in horror, and she nearly lost her soul. Who are you? I don't know you. Get lost. Get lost. The man pushed aside his tangled hair, revealing a delicate, scholarly face. Juner, it's me. I'm Wen Bin, your husband. I've been waiting for you in Qiantang for so long. Shun Biyun let out a hysterical scream, as if she had suffered the greatest shock of her life. She shook her head frantically. Go away. I don't know you. You've got the wrong person. The man became anxious. What do you mean, wrong person? You are Shin Biyun, my wife, Wen Bin's wife. You have a blue birthmark on your arm. It's you. His eyes darted to Gu Ziyun, and he suddenly trembled violently, as if realizing something. I get it now. I get it now. You've fallen for someone else, haven't you? You wretched woman. I knew you were deceiving me. You were the one who insisted on leaving with me back then. My family wasn't wealthy, but we gave you everything we had. You spent all our money, and now you despise me? You were the one who begged to come with me, and you were the one who abandoned me." He then turned to Gu Ziyun, lunging at him. "You want her, huh?
Fine.
Give me 1,000 taels, and I'll write a divorce letter." Shun Biyun collapsed in despair, pleading with all her might. "Zeengij, don't believe him. I don't know him. He's just a madman." But the moment when Bin accurately described the birthmark on her arm, the warmth on Gu Ziyun's face had already disappeared. The woman he cherished as his pure and untouchable first love was actually another man's wife. Oh my god, we actually had such a classmate. Miss Shen, she first stole her sister's place in the academy, then snatched away her fiancé, and now she even tried to kill her. What unforgivable crime did second Miss Shen commit? Have you heard about the incident in the Imperial Garden? A eunuch said he saw it. It was clear she fell into the water on her own. The crowd whispered among themselves, pointing fingers at Shun Biyun. Shun Biyun's face grew more and more panicked. She looked around in desperation, shaking her head frantically. Finally, she turned to Gu Ziyun, helpless and pitiful. Gu Ziyun, however, only gave her a gaze as cold as ice. Zeengij. Tears and frailty had always been her weapons, but this time, Gu Ziyun hesitated. After that day, Shun Biyun's reputation was utterly ruined. But that wasn't enough. In my past life, I had lost my life. At home, Shun Biyun vented her rage by smashing vase after vase, while the servants knelt on the ground, trembling in silence. From a celebrated talent of the capital, she had become its laughingstock.
How could she not hate me for that?
And in her mind, I was the one to blame. After her outburst, she stormed into my courtyard, her expression twisted with rage, her delicate features distorted. "Are you pleased with yourself now? Did you do this on purpose? Was everything part of your plan?" I simply replied calmly, "Sister, if you only wanted Gu Ziyun, you just had to say so. I would have let you have him. Since childhood, haven't I always given you whatever you wanted? Why did you have to make sure I died?" Shun Biyun scoffed arrogantly. "I don't need you to give me anything." She didn't want charity, nor did she want to be accused of stealing another's love. For her, the marriage decree Gu Ziyun personally begged for was her victory. Shun Biyun wasn't one to sit and wait for doom. She wept and pleaded her case before our father and stepmother. "Mother, she pretended to let me have the academy placement, but in truth, she schemed against me. She feared my reputation would surpass hers, so she deliberately pushed me into the water. That doctor and that wretched maid, she must have bribed them to frame me and ruin my name." With her glib tongue, she twisted truth into falsehood. She knelt before our parents, eyes filled with tears, accusing me relentlessly. Father and stepmother, already biased toward her, became more and more convinced that I was the scheming one. Stepmother, heart aching for her, spat with disgust, just like her birth mother, nothing but filth. Father only shook his head repeatedly, his tone full of disappointment. What a misfortune to the family, what a misfortune. As for Gu Ziyun, despite his disappointment in her, his love remained. Shun Biyun only needed to shed a few tears, whisper a few honeyed words, and Gu Ziyun was utterly defenseless. He had complete faith in his own judgment. "Shun Rong, don't think that these little tricks will make me change my mind. In this life, I will love only Biyun. In the past, I treated you well because you were her sister. From now on, I won't let you harm her again." I was calmly sipping tea in the courtyard when Gu Ziyun suddenly appeared, his eyes sharp, his brows furrowed in anger as he reprimanded me. Then, he turned to Shun Biyun, smiling tenderly, eyes filled with affection. I found it laughable, but soon he wouldn't be able to laugh anymore. As their wedding day neared, Shun Biyun and Gu Ziyun went out shopping together. The handsome man and the gentle beauty, their deep affection drawing many admiring glances. Suddenly, a ragged man rushed over, grabbing Shun Biyun's leg in delight. "Biyun, I finally found you. You said you were going to buy something, but you never came back. You returned to the capital. Why didn't you tell me? Come home with me." Mother, and I have missed you so much. Shin Biyun recognized his voice instantly. Her eyes widened in sheer terror.
Who are you?
I don't know you. Get lost. Get lost. The man pushed aside his messy hair, revealing a delicate scholar's face. Biyun, it's me. I'm Bin, your husband. I waited for you for so long in Qiantang. Shun Biyun screamed hysterically, as if she had seen a ghost. She shook her head frantically. Go away. I don't know you. You've got the wrong person. Bin grew anxious. What do you mean, wrong person? You are Shin Biyun, my wife. You have a blue birthmark on your arm. It's you. His eyes swept over to Gu Ziyun, and he suddenly trembled violently, realization dawning. I see. I see now. You've fallen for someone else, haven't you? You wretched woman. I knew you were lying to me. It was you who insisted on running away with me. My family wasn't rich, but I gave you the best I had. You drained our money, then abandoned me. Then he lunged at Gu Ziyun. You want her?
Fine.
Give me 1,000 taels, and I'll write a divorce letter. Shun Biyun broke down, pleading desperately. Ziyun, don't believe him. I don't know him. He's just a madman. But the moment Bin accurately described her birthmark, the joy on Gu Ziyun's face had already vanished. The woman he had cherished as his purest love turned out to be another man's wife.